Okay, so welcome to Introduction to Philosophy, Spring 2022. It's good to have you all here. And for everyone in the future watching this on YouTube, welcome as well. So what I like to do for these intro classes is ask you guys, so who all, at least that's here, by show of hands, is a freshman? Who's like, this is their first year? Okay, looks like about half. Who is interested in a philosophy major? Show of hands. Anybody? What a minor? Nobody. Okay, cool. So this is kind of interesting. So why did you choose philosophy?
I mean, I picked it because I thought it would kind of help me expand my, thinking and kind of help me think more in a more productive way about things and kind of maybe go a little more outside the box. I think.
Great. What's your name?
Kaz.
Kaz. Nice to meet you. So Kaz, did you guys hear him? Is that audible? Sort of.
If you want, I can speak closer.
Yeah, I think that'd be good. So Kaz's answer was that he thought that philosophy would expand his thinking, give him a more general view of the world, give him some out-of-the-box strengths in thinking. James likes humanities courses. Susie is interested in the subject but has never learned about it in depth either. And iPhone says, I believe it'll help me in understanding my thinking. Good, so whoever iPhone is, you should, and it looks like Zoom user too, make sure that your guys' names are listed on the Zoom call, because that's how I take attendance. I screenshot it at a random point in class. So if your name just says iPhone, then I don't know who you are and you won't get credit. Okay, so interesting answers. Who's read philosophy before? I have. Okay. Kevin, looks like. Anybody else? You're all very brave. So who knows what philosophy is? Nobody? So you guys all enrolled in a course for which you've never read any philosophy and have no idea what philosophy is. Raise your hands if that's true. Okay, there's like, what, two honest people? Everybody else is just blankly staring at the cameras. Come on, it's okay. So who wants to be brave, unmute, and share what they think philosophy is? So you've never read it. You don't know what it is, but you've been like interested enough to say, hey, this is like worth my time. This is worth, like, for half of us, like my first experience in college, I want to do philosophy. What's the underlying intuition that guided you to make that choice without, knowing what the heck any of it was about anyways? Anybody?
I took a similar, well, I don't know if it's similar, but psychology was like really interesting for me. And so I feel like maybe philosophy is like similar to that. And so, yeah, that's why I took it.
Cool, thanks, Susie. But I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit more. I'm curious what you think the relationship between philosophy and psychology is.
Just like the way of thinking and like with knowledge and stuff, or maybe the way we learn, that kind of thing. I'm not sure though.
Yeah, that's good. So all of that is right. There is a relationship between psychology and philosophy. In fact, that's what my specialty is. I do cognitive science and philosophy of psychology. I work in the psych lab as well. I run a whole study on visual expertise. We study architects and radiologists. So yeah, there's a huge crossover. How about anybody else? What like led you to choose philosophy, having never read any philosophy and having no idea really what philosophy is? Why are you here? You know, like you go to the store because you're hungry and you're out of food. That makes a lot of sense. You know that there's food at the store and that action will satisfy your goals. But you know, what's the analog to your hunger and what's the analog to the store that brought you to class today? What is philosophy to you?
Oh, to me, it's maybe just kind of breaking down kind of why we think about things the way we do, or kind of how we function, and just kind of the why.
Good. So Kaz's answer is that philosophy deals with the why, right? So you have like who, what, where, why. And so if you're asking yourself like the irritating 5 or 6 year olds do this. I don't know, I have kids. I remember doing it, but I don't remember how old I was. You know, why are we going to the store? Why do you want to do that? Why was that your answer, right? You just keep asking why and why and why. And then eventually the answer from irritated parent is because I said so, right? Maybe now that we're at a point of some degree of independence, we've moved on to college and we choose our classes and our curricula and we begin to self-identify as who we will become as fully fledged adults and all that. We're not satisfied with that because I said so answer anymore. And philosophy is a way to get into answering that question for yourself, or at least learning how to. Interesting. Anybody else like to share? Why philosophy? So it's an interesting feature of like Zoom University that differs from in-person classes. So there's this teaching strategy that I use that when I've taught in person always works, like 100% success rate. So what I'll do is I'll ask a question and then I wait and I count in my head 1, 2, 3, up to 10. And before 10 seconds pass, somebody raises their hand and answers. But for whatever reason, through the medium of Zoom, through the internet, that like communicative pressure doesn't express itself, right? That like social connective thing is like somehow broken. Like we're still here. This is better than nothing. It's better than you know, me just writing an essay and sending it to you guys. And like there's still educational communication going on here, but it's certainly not the same. Which I find interesting. I mean, like here we are looking at each other as if we were in class 2-dimensionally, but all the social rules change, which makes teaching an interesting challenge and maybe learning as well. So just an observation, and in fact, an observation that will come up later in the semester at the very end when we discuss embodiment, engagement with the world, and being together, which is the final lecture when we do philosophy movie night. Okay, so move on from those questions and my interesting observation about teaching in class and stuff. I would encourage you guys, if we're all mostly going to be online, to engage as much as possible. Philosophy is done through discussion and through communication, and I'll lecture quite a bit. But you know, if you have questions, if you're curious, if you have answers, there's there's no better time to voice them, to get your opinions, thoughts, and little inspired nuggets of wisdom out here. I mean, this is an opportunity, right? So we're in class together for, what is it, 3 months, 13 weeks. And that's our chance to, really dig in. Most of you will not become philosophy majors. Most of you will move on to do engineering and fine arts and mathematics and architecture, whatever it ends up being. You'll all go off in your own ways, but hopefully by the end of this class, you'll bring a little bit of philosophy with you in all that you do and all the different ways that you do it. And the way that that skill is going to be developed, at least through this, lecture component of the course, is together. So, there's your reason to speak up when you get the opportunity, because we only have 13 weeks of opportunity. Take advantage of it. Okay, who read Russell for today? Okay, if you didn't, no judgment. Okay, who didn't read Russell? All right, good. It's better to be honest always, because it's not for me, right? So Russell is the beginning of our course for a very specific reason. The chapter, maybe if you didn't read it, you come back to it at the end of the class, or when it feels right. It occurs at the end of his Bertrand Russell's book on the problems of philosophy. So basically, what Russell does in this tome is consider all of the major problems historically that philosophy has covered, dealt with, people's different answers and the debates surrounding them. And then the very last chapter is what is the value of philosophy. So basically what he's done is covered the history of philosophy and then said why it's important. We're kind of flipping that script. I signed Russell for our first class because I think it's important to communicate what the value of this practice is. That none of us have read philosophy before. You know what? Maybe I shouldn't have been surprised because you haven't read Russell, because I asked you if you read philosophy. Order of operations there. Anyways, we're flipping the script because it's important to communicate what the value of this practice is, what it is that we're really doing, and use that hopefully as inspiration to look forward to what we should be walking away from this class with as educational goals for ourselves, for our lives, and for our practices. So what we're going to do in this class is very much in the spirit of what Russell says the value of philosophy is all about. And we're going to do it by considering all sorts of different problems in philosophy. But first, the value of it. So what Russell tells us is that the value of philosophy is not in what it produces, very much like a STEM degree or a scientific discipline produces objects. And mathematicians produce theorems, engineers build bridges, architects build houses and buildings, and chemists synthesize molecules and all this, right? That there are material products. Business people make money, or hopefully, if you're good at what you do. There are material ends to be gained through these other disciplines. And Russell right off the bat says, well, philosophy is not about any of that. Philosophy does not have actual physical products out in the world. The products of philosophy, rather, are mental products. They're influences. And as Russell's going to end up arguing, there's no more important product or influence than what philosophy can do for us. So why is this where he starts, right? Why is it important to start with this question? What is it that philosophy produces, and why should we be concerned with the fact that it doesn't produce material ends? Well, because the culture that we live in Western capitalist society, and Bertrand Russell is a Lord Bertrand Russell in England at the turn of the 20th century. he was like middle-aged, so he probably born late 1800s, died maybe like 1940-ish, something like that, was about his lifespan. Interesting guy too. He was a pacifist during World War One, which was illegal in England. So he got sent to jail and wrote his autobiography in jail, all about philosophy and pacifism and why war is no good and we should care for each other and be kind to one another and not, take up arms and shoot the living heck out of each other. So in this world that Bertrand Russell sees developing, this new industrial world, he sees a bunch of people really concerned with capital, with products, with goals and ends. He sees people concerned with what's good for me and what's good for mine. And that tends to end up being wealth and objects and fame and honor and these sorts of things. When these are all sort of fleeting, consumable items of our world and our lives, right? So if the culture of his world is one that's interested in the acquisition of these material ends, but these material ends are fleeting and finite and move beyond us and do the world no real good, they might do us individual good, then there's something missing. And what's missing is mental cultivation. And Russell ultimately argues that it's the mental cultivation through a contemplative attitude that is inspired by philosophical practice that makes us the best that we can be and makes the world the best it can be as well. And so the products of philosophy are mental ones, they're influential ones, they're existential products. They're products that live in us. And insofar as the products of philosophy live in us, they see their influences, those products of philosophy, see their influences out in all of the material products that are thus subsequently created in all of our different disciplines and practices, in all of our different paths of life. So what comes first is the person and the enrichment of the person, and what comes second is what that person produces materially. So if we enrich the source, then we make better the rest of the world. So again, the goals of philosophy are not to produce these practical ends, like did you finish your TPS reports, or did you collect the data we wanted you to find, etc. But it's to produce knowledge and methods for pursuing truth. It's about producing the capacity for discussion, for critical argument, and for answering why questions, right? And it's this contemplative attitude that Russell keeps coming back to that underlies this capacity to acquire these existential products of philosophy, that the goal is to be contemplative, right? So what does that mean? Well, we reflect and we utilize interpretive creativity. And before all else, we do so through rigorous logical argument. We take evidence as premises. We draw inferences from those. Premises, and those inferences lead us to conclusions. Everything is mapped out along the way. It's mapped out in our minds. It's mapped out on the page, wherever it is that we enact and create this contemplative state of mind. And when we do so, we get what's called like the enlargement of the self, that through reflection and the consideration of argument, through the drawing of inferences from premises to conclusions for different positions, we grow because we become impartial to any particular view, that we are no longer bound by the biases, by the conceit of history, the prejudice of tradition or authority, but rather only are interested in reason and in knowledge, in how close we can come to getting it, but always, always never getting quite there, right? So if, for instance, philosophy produced material products, you could say, oh, well, philosophers have discovered that X is the truth. But if you ask any philosopher what some example of a truth is, they're going to be hard pressed to answer your question. And in fact, they probably would not even want to try to answer the question, right? They'd say something like, well, as Russell puts it, my field has yet to produce anything like that. We haven't produced the truth. So the goals of argument, of discussion, of reflection and contemplation is not to produce the truth, but rather to approach it and to learn how to approach it well. And if you never quite achieve the truth, or capital T truth, then at least what you've done is you've scrubbed away the chaff from your belief system, from your set of desires, your set of your mindset that could be biased or set in its ways for unprincipled reasons without ground, right? So what you're looking for in doing philosophy is not the fact of the matter, but rather what makes different facts of the matter more and less likely, better off, or more convincing. What makes your position hold water, or what is the hole at the bottom of the ship that is drawing water that needs to be pointed out conceptually speaking, right? So the mode then of like a physical science is data, is in product, is in experiment. The mode of say like physical science is motion, object, creation. The mode of like I don't know, economic science is money, right? The mode of philosophy, of the philosophical science then, is wisdom, knowledge, and methods for producing truth. Right? And this contemplative attitude is not measured in material ends like those others, but rather in its wisdom, knowledge, and methods for producing truth. And so this is a view that I have, and I don't know what other philosophers would say about it, but I personally think that there's philosophy in all things. That that you ask anyone a question, and they begin doing philosophy themselves. That across those other disciplines that produce their material ends, there's always philosophy. Wherever there's a model, a theory, or a story being told about data, about the world, about ourselves, there is philosophy being done. Insofar as we're asking why questions, insofar as we're exchanging and playing the game of giving and asking for reasons. This is the game of argument, giving and asking for reasons. We are doing philosophy, and that happens everywhere, right? So when, say, like Neil deGrasse Tyson says philosophy is useless, he's being a real dummy. In fact, that position, the uselessness of philosophy, is a philosophical position. And what he's doing is constructing a really poor argument that there are no material ends that philosophy produces. And so in order to be useful, you must produce a material end, therefore philosophy is useless. This is an argument. This is doing philosophy really poorly, but it's Neil deGrasse Tyson's burden to bear, I suppose. So insofar as philosophy is a science of argument, and there's argument in all things insofar as we're trying to interpret the world and present the best interpretation of the world that we can, we are engaging in a science of philosophy, sort of meta holistic science that umbrellas everything else. The philosopher is a storyteller and a weaver of stories, a wearer of masks and a creator of masks. The philosopher takes data and constructs evidence, fact, fiction, and forecast from that data. And the philosopher's job is satisfied only when a portion of the world and our experience in it is made a little less foggy. Right? So the goal is not to blow away the fog, but rather to clarify a little bit what stands before us so that we can take it, see it well, and use it for more contemplation, for more consideration, for more reflection. This is done across the sciences. So there have been these things called paradigm shifts in the grand scheme of scientific theories or historically, where we go from thinking that the world is just one chunk of matter called corpuscles that we can divide up, to thinking, no, rather the world is atomistic, that there are basic units of material objects that we call atoms, sort of at the bottom of things. We go from thinking that space is Euclidean to thinking that no, there's actually a lot of non-Euclidean spheres and circles and weird, funky areas under curves. We go from thinking that everything, physically speaking, can be manifested, mapped, and measured as long as it's observed, but then we learn that there's a sort of quantum state. We think that time is static, but no, it turns out that time is relative. Right? There are these shifts in theory, scientifically speaking, and the products of science. And these shifts are done, are made, are inspired from philosophical thinking, from reflection, from contemplation, from reimagining the world of possibility that's around us, from taking the bits of evidence, the datum that exist in our world and our experience, and the different ways in which we can look at those data through different measuring tools and different measuring paradigms. And what you get at the other end of these experiments is a bunch of numbers. You get a really big Excel spreadsheet. You get a bunch of Greek symbols and letters and numbers, E equals MC squared or whatever. But that's not a truth. It's not a story of the universe. That doesn't make our experience any more comprehensible or workable in the world until we take that next philosophical step, until we say what it means to us for the world to be constituted as such, for the world to be constituted atomistically or relativistically or quantum mechanically or Newtonianly. Adverb of Newtonian, I don't think works, but you get the point. That these shifts are done from a contemplative attitude, and so we see this existential operation produce itself through the material effects of the world around us. Okay, so in this way, many of us, if not all of us, are philosophers, and some of us more poorly than others. But the goal of this class again is to like sharpen your philosophical skills, to give you the power and the creative space to develop these skills, so that when you go off into your own worlds and your own lives, you are bringing both a respect for and a capacity to operate within this contemplative space of reflection that enriches your world and the world around you. We're all seekers of truth, broadly construed, but more importantly, we're all unifiers, right? We want to make sense of things. We want to connect the world together. We want to have it all click, And so our goal is to understand the world and to operate well within it. And this requires stories and interpretations, and it requires constructing lessons and arguments to share insights with our communities. That an insight that's incommunicable to anyone else might feel great, but what is it really doing? An insight that lives solipsistically, that is just like in your own head and has no outward effect, is no good. You have to be able to communicate these things. And philosophy is a channel through which this communication is able to occur. And so the philosopher in each of us can be seen anywhere, at the corner store organizing shelves, thinking, what if we moved these end caps over here and got more foot traffic, and then we sell more products? Or in the physics department, inventing new relativity. Wherever there's a story to be told, there's an argument to be made for the validity and integrity of that story. This is where philosophy is being done. And this is what philosophy produces, not some material. And we're not widget makers as philosophers. We're producers of wisdom. And what that means, what the products of wisdom are, we'll look at much closer next week when we dig into Plato and the Apology. In the spirit, I'm gonna like pause lecture mode for just a second. My grandfather called me recently. In fact, this was like 6 months ago now, but it's still really relevant and kind of interesting. So he called me recently, and we had this fun conversation. And he asked, Spencer, is the goal of a philosophical argument to prove that you're right or to determine what's true? So think about that question. Is the goal of philosophy to prove that you're right or to determine what's true? I'm going to put you guys into breakout groups. We'll take 3 minutes. It'll be quick. Come back, and then we'll discuss what we discussed in our breakout groups. Okay. What do you think? Like, you think 5 people to a group is too many?
3 to 5.
I don't know. Off to your rooms.
Define the truth.
To define the truth.
No, to find the truth.
Find the truth. And why do you think that?
Because trying to prove whether you're right is kind of meaningless because it's subjective whether you're right or wrong. And to find that truth gives you a bit more like in the right than wrong, you know what I mean?
Sure. Okay, so this is interesting. This is something that Kaz and I were discussing in our group here. Determining what's true and proving that you're right are 2 different kinds of arguments, where the one is personal. Proving that you're right is a self-satisfaction. It's just showing to everybody around you that what it is that you said is incontrovertible or incontrovertible enough. Whereas the determination of truth is something more universal. It's something that anybody should be able to get on board with. Right? But you made an interesting distinction here when you said that proving what's right is subjective and determining what's true isn't, sort of in the spirit of anybody should be able to get on board with what's been determined to be true. Is that you'll have competing intuitions and competing theories that remain subjective, though equally or at least differently valid. So for instance, in logic, there are 2 different interpretations of negation. So we all remember what happens to a negative number when you multiply it by a negative number.
Becomes a positive.
Yeah, good. It becomes a positive. So this is due to basic logic, that you're like your most basic form of propositional logic, basically. That if you negate a negation, you get a positive. There are alternative systems of axia, sets of theorems that establish their own logical systems that deny that P is equal to not P, right? That -1 is equal to -1 times -1, roughly speaking. And this is due to denying what's called the law of excluded middle, which we often do want to get rid of. It's the difference between propositional logic, the most basic form of logic you learn in any logic class, and what's called intuitionist logic, which you'd study in a more advanced class. But intuitionist logic and propositional logic are both perfectly valid and consistent systems. They are sets of axia that operative together construct a whole logical system that is within that system irrefutable. Okay, but they are inconsistent with one another. In much the same way, the Newtonian conception of physics works perfectly for macro objects, right? You drop a boulder down a ramp and you can measure when it'll get to the end given the angle of the ramp and the weight of the boulder. However, for really itty bitty tiny objects, really small like electrons and stuff, Newtonian physics stops working so well, right? That you need quantum physics. So you have two competing interpretations of like grand unified interpretations of the world that are inconsistent with one another, but both work in their own right. So here we have a kind of subjectivity. You could be an intuitionist or a propositional logician and have a subjective opinion about what the right kind of logic is, but disagree with the other person, but be unable to determine what's true in these contrasting positions because both satisfy all of the right standards for what would count as good or true. Similar with your Newton and Niels Bohr. Whatever. How about anybody else? What did we decide in other groups? Is the goal of philosophy to prove you're right or determine what's true?
In our group, we decided that it was the goal is to find the truth, but usually that's not what happens because most people want to be right, and it's kind of hard to look outside of your like own perspective for a lot of people. And for the most part, like it'll take a lot more to change your mind than to just stick with what you already believe. And so I think like unknowingly most people will in arguments try and be right rather than find the truth, but I think finding the truth would be the end goal.
Perfect. Yeah, so cool answer. Because you brought a little bit of psychological, existential interpretation into it, saying like, look, like we might all want to determine what's true. We might all think that that's what's more important. However, it's easy to get caught up in the game of proving that you're right. And saying like, look, this is what's up to me. And it's easier for us to just fall back. I mean, this is true for everybody. It's so much easier to just rely on what you believe and what's worked than to question your dogmatisms and force yourself out into the unknown, into that uncomfortable space of intellectual epistemic discomfort where anything could be the case, or at least where I'm uncertain what could be the case. That state of uncertainty is really important to growing, right? To developing new ideas within ourselves, sort of socially for each other, like being in a state of a scientific community that's uncertain about something is going to be seeking for answers everywhere, right? But it's very easy to get caught up in your own confirmation bias. And I think a sort of interesting analog to this is getting caught up in when we really love people, when we care about them, we want what's good for them. And we might think that some of the things that they think aren't good for them. And so rather than being interested in determining what's true, we impose what we think is, what we hope is good for the person because we love that person, we care about them. And that kind of imposition looks a lot like proof of being right. So for example, Thanksgiving political conversations. We're all aware of these. We've all had this quality of conversation where you're with your loved ones and you feel like locked into battle where you wouldn't with a random stranger. You'd always just like get up and walk away, or you're not committed to random people in the same way you're committed to your family. And so you get caught and out of cover and then bent out of shape, and your interest in loving each other becomes an interest in proving oneself and the other themselves right, and then you butt heads. The goal of philosophy is, and again of this contemplative attitude, is to inspire a place where that kind of headbutting doesn't occur, where you can listen and hear and evaluate the terms and conditions of someone else's position, their belief system, their arguments, and at the same time, both disagree and respect, or be uncertain of and respect, right? That ideas are just that, they're only ideas. And there are better and worse ones. And our goal through this class and through the readings and lessons that I've planned for us is to get a fuller sense of what makes ideas good and bad, of how we can engage even practically. So like the lessons themselves are only half of what matters. It's also the practice and how those lessons are provided, how the author writes what they do, how they ask the questions that they do. For instance, Christian was saying it's hard to give up your dogmatic beliefs. Descartes gives up all of his beliefs, everything. Just I'm going to doubt the entire world and universe and myself away, and what's left. And what he finds that's left is what allows him to build the system of his own beliefs that he sees as incontrovertible, which we'll look at in a couple of weeks. Good. Anybody else? What did we chat about? Prove you right, determine what's true. You want to know my answer?
I was kind of talking with my group earlier that I think that maybe for the entire, like the broad spectrum of philosophy, it's to determine truth. But like other people have saying that on an individual level, individual philosophers in that pursuit of truth will kind of confirmation bias themselves into trying to prove themselves correct. Because whatever in their pursuit for whatever they're trying to determine as truth, that whatever line of reasoning they use to get there is going to be how they justify anything. And so when they have a conversation with somebody else who uses a different line of reasoning to get to a different endpoint, then what is the truth? Like, and is truth subjective, objective? Are there multiple truths? Can there be multiple solutions to the equation, I guess? And so it's kind of hard to answer, but I think the goal is to find truth. But you, like everyone else has said, you kind of get wrapped up in like trying to be right because of prior, biases that are intrinsic almost just because of the way the human experience is.
Great, thank you. So I love this answer. It warns us, the answer warns us of around every corner of argument, of discussion is argument, is confusion, is pride. It's always threatening, always looming. And so one of the goals of this contemplative attitude philosophy is not just to determine what's true, but to create in us this existential attitude where we're not given to the temptation to argue, but we're given to the activity of arguing in a sense of giving and asking for reasons. We're not given to the temptation of pride and being right, but rather in impartial interest in the pursuit of truth more generally. And this is an attitude. The idea that philosophy is therapeutic in this way, right? That it aids in our lives, is one that's been around forever. Philosophy as therapy, understood like in those specific terms, is something that comes from Wittgenstein, who was Bertrand Russell's most brilliant, more brilliant than Russell even in my estimation, graduate student Wittgenstein. Wittgenstein's a wild character. I wish we had time in this class to cover him, because he is just he is an insane human in like every sense of the term. Wonderful and insane. Anyways, he says philosophy is therapy, but dating all the way back to like the invention of philosophy in the West, you have the Stoics and the Cynics and the Epicureans and the skeptics, the Pyrrhonian skeptics and the academic skeptics, the two different schools of skepticism. And all of these different philosophical systems were not developed for the sake of determining what's true. In fact, all of them kind of eschewed that idea that we can't ever get there. There's a way to get there better than others. But the main goal of these schools of philosophy was rather to inspire certain existential attitudes. Ataraxia, in the case of the skeptics, is this state in which proposition A and proposition not A are both seen with equal weight. And so we're left in the space of uncertainty in between. And we get what's called tranquillitas from ataraxia of conceptual dogmatisms, where you feel sort of at peace. In the state of uncertainty, you find comfort. You find like it's okay to be here. Same idea with Stoic Seneca, one of the inventors of Stoicism, is a slave. So the idea of only worrying about what you can control and nothing else. Well, he's a slave. So this is like a healthy way for him to think. It's also really metaphysically interesting stuff. Marcus Aurelius, on the opposite end of the political power spectrum, an emperor of Rome, like the last good emperor of Rome for a very long time, was like the philosopher king, frankly, and he was a Stoic as well, and you know, dealt with the pressures of ruling the Roman Empire, right? With this contemplative attitude, with this state of it's okay to be uncertain, to be, you know, like completely thrown out and out of control, as long as I can have this like therapeutic state of mind. Now, the other part of your answer, Buzzer, I thought was good as well, which is that if the temptation is to prove that we're right or to fall into pride or whatever, the goal is to search for truth. It's not to determine what's true. And so when I was having this conversation with my grandfather, this is what I picked up on. I said, look, it's neither. It's not proving you're right or determining what's true, because you can't ever determine what's true. We're always left at the end of the day. We turn the soil of inquiry, questioning of evidence, of perspective and interpretation with the spade of contemplation, until we hit bedrock, until we can search and dig no further. And in this point, at this point, we get another Greek word for it from Plato, aporia, where we have gone as far as we can in inquiry, and we know that we haven't arrived at an answer, but isn't there still this wonderful beauty in having gone so far, so much deeper and closer to the truth? We're always left in this foggy unknown, and yet there's value in the process and the progress towards that which we may never obtain, which is capital T truth. But what we get along the way are, in the one case, this existential therapeutic attitude of equanimity, of calmness, of respect despite disagreement. And in the other case, this existential influence that sees itself played out through all of our other material ends and practices and activities, that to live and examine like to live philosophically as an engineer or as an architect, as an artist, as an athlete, or, you know, academic, whoever else, to live any of these lives philosophically is to live it in a way that will see that tranquility and calmness, that ability to respect and analyze, to always discuss without falling to the temptation of pride and proving oneself right, these solipsistic ends and goals. We'll see the products of those other activities enriched through the existential non-material ends of philosophy. And it's in this spirit that Russell says, look, what philosophy really does is it enlarges the self. That when we become uncertain of some proposition, system of beliefs, idea, whatever, what we do is we look for its alternative. And then looking for its alternative, we step out of our comfort zone and we grow a little bit, we learn a little bit. And when we do this as a community, we grow as a community. And so we get this personal enlargement and this communal enlargement that sees us ever expanding as people, ever expanding through the uncertainty, the non-truth, that the truth that we never find but are always looking for. And this is the world that Russell wants to live in, not one where we're picking up guns and shooting each other for a few square miles of land, right? So philosophy is valuable precisely because it produces uncertainty, and uncertainty produces impartiality, and impartiality produces the contemplative expansion of self. So as Russell says, just to conclude this section, which I think is totally awesome. I love this quote. So he says, thus, to sum up our discussion of the value of philosophy, philosophy is to be studied not for the sake of any definite answers to its questions, since no definite answers can, as a rule, be known to be true, but rather for the sake of the questions themselves. Because these questions enlarge our conception of what is possible, enrich our intellectual imagination, and diminish the dogmatic assurance which closes the mind against speculation. But above all, because through the greatness of the universe which philosophy contemplates, the mind is also rendered great and becomes capable of that union with the universe, which constitutes its highest good union. Oh, I repeated that. Which constitutes its highest good. I had the last line repeated over and over for some reason. And I loved it. For one, it's a beautiful sense. I mean, Russell was a brilliant logician, a pretty good politician for philosophy, pretty good politician in general, actually. But if he's nothing else, he is a beautiful author. So, and it's like 5 pages. So if you're excited about these ideas, I recommend reading it. It is, I love it. That's why I signed it. And I think it kind of, I agree with it. There are a lot of different ideas of what the value of philosophy is. I think Russell is certainly onto it. Okay, so that is the fun bit for today. The rest we're going to do syllabus stuff. So buckle up if you weren't buckled already, or live wild and free. So the way that I've built this class, and it's always fun to start a class with philosophy itself and not do syllabus stuff. It's like the most boring thing in the world. I hated that when I was a student. Like, you show up to the first day of class and you get 30 minutes of exactly everything I already read on the syllabus, just like droned back to me. No disrespect to other professors, but I think there is a better way. Part of the reason I've built this lesson with the philosophy first and the course structure after is because the course structure is very much inspired by like the value of philosophy as I see it. That I want you guys to extract all of the juice and nectar from the opportunity that is this class that we're going to like produce together through our lessons. And I think the way that you do that is with freedom, without stress, and with as much creativity and inspiration as you can possibly muster. So I see these as like the core educational values that you should be developing and enriching through a philosophy curriculum in general. So this is why I constructed the course to be this way. So what is the course construction? I've constructed our class to revolve around big indefinite questions like, is there a God? And am I free? Do I have free will? What does it mean to be good or bad? What is the relationship between mind and body? What is the world? Things like this, right? And there are questions that I asked myself when I was fresh into college, when I was, dewy-eyed and new to the world of adulthood, and still worry about to this day. They're the topics that I find most interesting, and they inspired me to end up where I'm at now. And I hope that they, if not, lead you where I am now, at least like inspire you and interest you, get you stoked on philosophy, because I've chosen what I think are the coolest issues in philosophy to sort of survey. So in terms of how readings will go, we'll only spend like 1 week on each reading. And each week will be a different big question. What is all this? What am I? Who am I? Is human nature good or bad? Am I free? How should I act? Who should I be? What is God? Is there a God? What is happiness? Etc. What's the philosophical life? And again, the goal is not to answer any of these questions, but through the scope of each question to do that self-enlargement thing, right? To sort of inspire the curiosity and the impartiality, the uncertainty at the base of things, to give you a real sense of philosophical thinking from all sorts of different angles. Okay, so that's and it won't be clear right away, I don't think, but there is a narrative to the topics that I've chosen too, and how they all like communicate with each other through time. So by the end of the class, you will certainly, hopefully, if I've done my job right, see the story of philosophy being told of a particular standpoint through which philosophical engagement occurs, and how every reading communicates with every other reading. Again, by the end of the course. So stick with it until we get there. And again, the number one way, the best way to get the most out of this class is, one, to read before lecture. Sometimes it's like argued, should you read before or after? In my opinion, and you can do this however you like, it's up to you. In my opinion, I always got the most out of my classes when I read before and then went to lecture. And again, lecture is not required. So like watching it on YouTube is just fine too. So reading before, even if you don't understand, and then watching the lecture, attending or otherwise. So just having the ideas like in your head, even if you don't understand them, they're still there playing around, incubating. This is like a chapter of my dissertation, in fact, is on incubation. That they'll really blossom and stuff as we come to class. So that's how I suggest doing it. But it's all up to you. And the idea that it's all up to you is at the heart of this class's grading structure. So grading structure, really important, because the way that I'm grading this class, the way that you were asked to perform assignments and all that for this class, is very likely unlike any other class that you've taken. So the syllabus has all the details, but I'll say them here too, it helps to have it 2 different forms. It's a choose your own adventure style class. Okay, so there's something like 460 points available to earn. Every point is 1%, and you need to earn 94 points to get an A, or 89 points to get a B plus, or 70 points to get a C, right? Super simple. Every point you earn is 1% of your grade. So earn as many points as you want to earn in order to get the grade that you feel you deserve and want to earn, okay? It's up to you. Now, of the 400, like if you did every assignment perfectly, which would be impressive, to say this. If you did every assignment perfectly, you would end the class with a 460%, I think, is, if that's the actual number, it's 460%. Every semester, I get students who go like way above and beyond, like they go 200% even, because they just get excited and want to do stuff, which I think is great. So don't feel like you ever have to stop. Keep, give whatever it is that you want to give, and I'll be there to receive it and evaluate and give you back feedback and comments and all that. There are 3 due dates. There is the due date for the midterm, the due date for the final, and then the end of the class, the very end of the semester. Every assignment is optional. Every assignment is optional. The only thing that is not optional is doing nothing, right? So if you do nothing, you get 0% and you fail, okay? But how you get across the finish line, how you earn your C or B or A or whatever it is up to you. You can choose to take a midterm, you can choose to take a final, you can choose to take neither. You can choose to do discussion boards, you can choose to do write-ups, you can choose to do a term paper essay. Whatever assignments you choose, do them well. Don't plagiarize. For God's sake, don't plagiarize, please. It's awful. I'm not stupid. I'm really good at this, and I've been doing it a long time. You won't get away with it. Please don't plagiarize. It's not good for you either. Don't cheat. You get more out of it when you actually try. And I see the trying in your writing, and that's a part of my estimation of it being good or bad. If you're lazy and awful, then you will get a lazy and awful grade. But if it doesn't need to be perfect, it needs to be genuine and it needs to be good. Anyways, so enough moralizing, I apologize. You can earn 100% of the grade through discussion boards alone. You can earn 100% of the grade through write-ups alone. You can earn 100% of the grade through tests alone. So if you, every semester I have students who just take a midterm and a final, they never show up to class. They do really well on both of them, they get an A, and that's it. I have students, most students, so I'd say like the order of like 7 and 10, will do a blend of discussion board posts, of write-ups, of attendance here and there, and of like maybe an exam. That's a pretty common strategy. But you're not required to take tests. You're not required to do discussion boards. You're not, none of it. What I want from you guys is investment. I want to see you decide for yourselves the best way to get educated. I want you to empower yourselves to take whatever creative inspiration comes from our shared discourse through YouTube, through Zoom, or through in person, and manifest that in through the channels, the avenues that I've constructed for you that show me that you are actually, doing well in the course. That is the write-ups, discussions, tests, etc. You can also get points from attendance. So I think I have it set at 5 points per class if you're in person or if you have your camera on. And I don't think there's attendance points for tonight. Tonight is optional. I took a screenshot anyways, just in case I decide, but I'll have to think about it. So what I've done is I've made it so that attendance, if you show up with your camera on, 5 points. If your camera is off, it's 2 points, because there's like a communication thing going on here. Like, it's important that we're together, that we're engaging in the communion of philosophy and education with one another, and that doesn't happen with gray boxes in the void of Zoom space. We got to do our best, and ideally in person, but COVID sucks, man. It's the worst. We're in calendar year 3 of this awful pandemic. It's the absolute worst. But we do the best that we can to make do, and so we'll do it. Attendance, I think, can get you up to 65 points. And the reason I did this, rather than for every other assignment type, you can pass the class just by doing another one, is that if you're attending class, I still want to see like some work, like take an exam or two. You can like get close to passing, but not quite. I need to see like some other work just so that my due diligence is done and getting you the right standard and quality of education. No like skating by. Now, as I was saying, in choosing your own venture, get invested. Choose the work that you want to do. Some of us learn best by engaging with each other in person or through Zoom, and so earn your points through attendance. Some of us do philosophy by communicating in like online discussion board posts, right? Like on Facebook or through email or text message or whatever, like we chat with each other virtually. And this is an opportunity on the discussion board to do philosophy with one another through text. Some of us do it privately in contemplation and then have, like ideas. And so you can do write-ups. You can write what you learned from a reading, what the reading said. The goal of the write-up is to in concise and complete summation, capture the idea of the author. It's not to share your own ideas. The idea of the write-up is not to like say, I felt this way about it, but rather to show me that you like mastered the idea that's present in the paper. So you can earn your grade by doing write-ups. You can earn your grade by doing tests. Similar reason, just sort of more weighty. And then some students learn best by writing a great deal, right? So doing like a term paper, picking an idea that interests you, that you're inspired by, that you want to research and learn about and dig into. And I'll be your resource through all of it to give you feedback, to help you along the way to doing all of these things better with philosophy in general. So as we go forward, if you get bad grades on stuff, that's okay, right? Because there's 460 points available. So let's say in like a normal class, you get a 50% on a test. Not that I'm saying like I give 50%, it's like you get what you earn. I'm not an unfair grader. But say you get like a 50% on a test, in a normal class, like the best grade you can get in that class is all of a sudden like an 81 if you get 100% on your other assignment, right? I think that's absurd. I don't think that you're learning, that the standard that measures and evaluates your learning should be punished in that sort of way. I always believe that like education is what you put into it, and so like redemption is always possible. If you don't do well on an assignment, if you don't do well on every assignment, but you do like a ton of them, that shows me like you're still committed, and you know, like philosophy is for anyone, but may not be for everyone, right? So, you know, show me that you're committed to earning a grade, and you will, or do well on the assignments that you're inspired to do and earn your grade and do well. Don't feel like there's no outs, because there always are, right? I'm always willing to work with you guys to give you feedback to get you across that finish line. And what's important to me is that you're all learning and growing, and that we're doing it together, right? And so that's why I've done this like choose your own adventure thing. There's a rule that you can only earn up to 50% of the grade before the midterm, because I don't want you to like do all the work and then just like never appear again after a month. Write-ups are worth 10 points each. Discussion boards can be worth up to 10 points too. So the way discussion boards work is it's 3 points for asking a question about the reading, like topical question, 5 points, up to 5 points for answering one of your classmates' questions as if you were me, as if you were a professor. So don't just say like, I agree with you. The standard for success here is in the discussion board post is, could my comment inspire more questions, right? Could my comment inspire a conversation? So if someone says something like, I'm curious about Russell's enlargement of the self and what it has to do with dogmatism for reasons X, Y, and Z, and you respond, yes, that gets 0 points. And you understand why that would get 0 points, right? Like it's a response, but it does nothing to respond to the question, nor does it inspire future conversation. Don't be a boring conversationalist. If you're doing the discussion boards, do it because you're like invested in communicating. And then if you respond to students, if you respond to someone's response to your question, you get 2 bonus points. You can only earn 10 points per week's discussion board. So like you can't do, you can't ask what would be like 35 questions to earn, you know, like 112 points or whatever it is, 109 points on 1 week's discussion board post. No, only 10 points per week's discussion board post. You can retroactively post. So like if we did Descartes week 1, but then, you know, like week 8, you have a thought like, wait, what did Descartes really mean by this? You can go back and you can, you know, no due dates. You can respond to whatever discussion board post whatever write-ups you want, whatever you like, except for the midterm and final. You have 10 days. There's a 10-day window to do these. So do them within the window, but I'll give you the test and you take it. The way my tests work is there's, I want to say 5 prompts, it might be 4. and you choose 3 of them. And each prompt is like just a paragraph full of questions, and you answer all the questions and you get a good grade, basically. What else? Let's see.
So I have a quick question.
Sure.
So with your tests, for example, if you were to take both of them but fail both of them, so you get 50% on both, the 50% of the points that you missed will not go against you, but the 50% of the points that you got will add to whatever points you currently have, correct?
That's correct.
So if I take both tests and bomb both, get 50% on both, then I still have, is that 100 points total? How much? I don't know. I don't remember how much the tests are worth.
Each test is worth 50 points in total.
So you'd get 25 points for each test, and then you'd have a total of 50 points
If
afterwards.
you earned 25 points from each test, yeah. So
Okay.
and like I said, I'm a fair grader. So what you do, I'll give you that many points. And if you absolutely bomb, then I have no qualms giving you 10 points on an exam because you absolutely bombed. But you can also always retake tests, or the midterm, because the final is just the final. I have to like submit grades after the final gets turned in. You can always retake your midterm for up to like half credit. So like if you earned 25 out of 50 points on the midterm, you could retake it for maybe like 37.5 points or something, like half of the points to 50. Or say you like don't take a midterm, but then you decide you want to go back and do it, you can earn up to 25 points instead of 50. And so you can always like revise and edit and make better, because that's all philosophy too, right? It's all growth, progress, and development. The way attendance works is, I don't have to have you sign a thing, it's just even so no sweat. But normally there's a thing to sign if you're in person. I take a screenshot at a random time in class. You won't know when it's happening, probably. And the screenshot is the judge, jury, and executioner for that grade. So like if you turn your camera off for whatever reason, in the moment I take the screenshot, that's too bad, but that's the way that I do it. So so that lectures go usually about an hour and a half. Oh, and really important, so schedule stuff. So originally I'd scheduled the class for Monday because this room where I live record was free on Mondays, but last minute a professor got their class scheduled on top of the time that I'd set out. Today, Tuesdays are occupied by the philosophy club, and they can't move, so class will be on Thursdays at 5:30. I apologize for all the shifts and scheduling for the live sessions. Thursdays are clear. Thursdays 5:30 to like 7-ish will be our schedule. I'll edit the syllabus and all the Zoom stuff again. I apologize for all that last minute scheduling changes. That technically the class is online, so none of this is like official with the university or whatever. This is all just, I'm doing it because I think it's good for you guys, and it's good for me to, as a teacher, to have you all here with me. So at least the opportunity for it. So we got to make do with working around the university's structures.
Quick question. With the midterm, like say you went to a bunch of the classes and maybe did some write-ups and had 40 points, and then you did the midterm and say you did pretty good, got a 90 or an 80, so you got 40 points from that. Would you only get like the remaining 10 because you can only get 50 before the midterm?
Yes, I mean this gets a little tricky. Yes, technically yes. So like if you're at 40 points already, I would suggest not taking midterm for the full 50 points. Like take it later for 25 if you really need it at the end. Again, the goal there are ways to game the system, and if you game the system, you only hurt yourself, right? You get the material product at the end of what you're wanting, which is the A or whatever, the transcript, but you miss completely on the opportunity to become a philosopher in your own right. So I recommend not gaming the system, but that rule is there to just sort of artificially a little bit force you guys into not gaming the system. So if you earn all your points through a couple write-ups and attendance and stuff up to half point, skip the midterm. Just take it easy on yourself, right? And earn the other 50 points after the second half of the class. If you find ways to game the system that aren't written in the syllabus, right? They aren't rules written down yet, fair game, but it is liable to change after, right? So if I think that there's someone is abusing or breaking the system, I'll change it, but nothing will be retroactive, right? That's just not fair to change rules halfway through the game. But I've taught this class a few times. It's worked really well. Students have really enjoyed it. I've loved doing it. And I haven't had any of those issues. So I think, the set of rules that we have works and works well, and works especially well for you guys and engaging with the course's content. At least so I hope. Okay, so again, next week we meet on Thursday at 5:30 instead of Tuesday. Just sad to have to change so many times. Again, I apologize. Choose your own adventure, get inspired, do the work that speaks to you. Come to class or don't. Watch all of the lectures will be uploaded to YouTube, usually 24 or 48 hours afterwards. Kind of depends on me, like what I'm doing that evening or the next day if I forget or whatever, but usually 24 to 48 hours. The link to the YouTube channel is in Canvas. I think that's all I got. Any other questions? No. How do we feel? Who feels good? Okay. Who feels bad? Oh yeah, some of you both. Excellent. This is what philosophy should do to you. Great. You're already most of the way there. Okay, so we'll call it here. Next week we do Plato's Apology. Apology doesn't mean I'm sorry. In Greek, it means defense. So just have that in mind when you pick up the book. It's excellent. It is sort of like the first turn of the wheel of Western philosophy. And it's a beautiful read. So enjoy it, and we'll chat about it next week. Good luck. Take care. Be well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.